Perhaps the most important pruning cuts we make on trees are not the ones that we do on big trees with large branches, but it's the ones we do on little trees such as this when we're in our first or second or third year of pruning, or in reality what is probably the first or second or third year of training. What we're trying to do is to develop the scaffold branches or the main structure of the tree so that we ensure that we have a healthy, strong, attractive looking tree for the life of the tree. There's a couple of important things to keep in mind. One is that in some ways it's very much an art. And not only is it an art, but you have to kind of have a vision as to what you want this tree to look like when you're finished. Along with that, it requires a lot of patience. If this tree were a sculpture, I could come along and prune it here or cut it here or there and modify it as I see fit. But where it's a tree, we have a little different situation because I make some cuts, and then I have to wait until next year, see how the tree grows in response to those cuts, and then come back in on a following year and make more cuts. It points out a very important issue with trees, and that is that they have to be pruned every year. By pruning a tree such as this every year, we can respond to the growth changes that occur on a yearly basis, and we can make the changes or the corrections that we need to very small branches instead of having to come in and cut some very large branches. As we look at training a young tree, generally the rules that we have are the same as we would with any other pruning situation. The first thing we want to do is get rid of any diseased or dead or dying branches. If we have a dead stub such as this one, we can come in and remove that stub. If we see any disease, it's a good opportunity to remove it. You want to remove the dead stubs because they can be sites for the entry of pathogens into the tree. The next step that we want to look at is, are there any structural problems that we need to be aware of? Are there narrow crotch angles, branches that cross over, that rub, any concerns such as that? We have a problem here. If you look at this tree, we've got a central leader right here, and ideally, in order to keep this maple tree as healthy and strong as possible, we'd like to keep it as a central leader type tree. One main branch going up and then lateral branches coming from that. In this situation though, we have lateral branches that are in the process of outgrowing that central leader. If we allow those laterals to continue to be taller than the main leader, then we get a situation where we can have one or more co-dominant leaders, and we end up with structural weaknesses, especially if we have narrow crotch angles, such as we can see right here. So the first thing we'd want to do in this case is to get rid of the potential weakness of that narrow crotch angle. Probably this one right here is a little bit too narrow as well, and it also competes with that central leader, so we'll reduce it in size. The other thing that we can do is to come in and head or tip back some of these laterals so that, again, the central leader remains the uppermost branch that we would have there, so that it retains apical dominance. After we've taken care of the major structural problems, the next step that we want to come into is to start to look at the spacing of our scaffolding branches. Now with this particular tree, with any tree, we don't want to take off more wood than we actually have to. In general, the more leaf area you have, the faster the tree will grow, and we've taken off about all that we can for this particular year. In the future though, a couple of decisions that we'll have to make would concern, first of all, where do we want our bottom branch to be? In this park, probably the lowest branches are at this level or maybe even a little higher. And so eventually we may end up removing all of these branches. That doesn't mean that we necessarily need to do that this year. We can leave it till next year or the year following. And in fact, if we can leave these branches on for a few years, it helps us to get a stronger trunk that grows in diameter more quickly and rapidly than if we were to cut all of them off. When we decide which scaffold branches we want to retain, the other thing that's important to keep in mind is that they should be spaced probably 8 to 12 inches apart as a minimum, and they should be spaced radially or around the tree so that we don't have all the branches one above another, but that we move around the tree as we as we go on up. Another thing that's important to point out is that when this tree was planted last year, we didn't do any pruning at that time except to remove any broken branches or any diseased branches that might have been present. The reason for that is that there have been studies that have shown that if we can leave most of these terminal buds present, then we tend to get better root growth than if those are removed. If we remove them, then we tend to slow the growth down. So we like to leave as much of the growing points as possible during that first season of growth. And then the next year we come in and begin our pruning. The pruning process again requires patience. It should take place over several years. You cannot come in and do all the pruning in 1 year and expect that tree to be pruned or trained for the rest of its life. It requires a little bit of fine tuning each year as you go along, and then you get a high quality tree as compared to trying to do it all at once when you just run into problems.